All right, we are live. Welcome, everybody, to Standing for Truth. I am your host, Donnie, and we are here tonight for the much anticipated follow-up debate between Dr. Kent Hovind and David Neff. The topic for tonight: what is the best evidence for evolution? Both David and Kent have been here on this platform before, and I am happy to have them here again for tonight's epic debate. Now, we've got a large chat already, and these live chats have been quite lively during the last several debates. So, guys, make sure you are keeping it cordial and respectful in the live chat, showing the debaters of tonight the respect that they deserve. Make sure you're attacking the arguments and not the debaters themselves. So tonight is going to be a formal debate. We are going to be having equally timed opening statements between 12 and, let's say, 14 minutes. We're not going to be overly strict. Whatever David takes, we're going to allow Kent to take equal time. Then we're going to have an 8-minute uninterrupted rebuttal, and then a discussion. Free-flowing, organic discussion where we're going to do our best to make sure that it's professional, sophisticated, equally timed, focusing on one topic at a time, and discussing the points that are brought up in the openings and the rebuttals. Then we're going to have a 5-minute closing statement, and then this is where we get you guys in the audience involved. We're going to have an audience Q&A, roughly 25, 30 minutes. So make sure you're tagging me with your questions at Standing for Truth. That way I don't miss them. Okay, enough for me. You guys came here to see the debaters, Kent and David, the stars of the show. Gentlemen, thank you so much for giving us your time for tonight.
You're welcome.
Why don't we kind of, as we usually do, why don't we break the ice, get to know the debaters a little bit before we get into the opening statements. David, why don't we start with you? How you been? What's going on over at your channel? And a little bit about who you are.
Well, thank you very much, Standing, and thank you, Mr. Kent, for agreeing to debate me once again. I hope my audio is okay, and I hope everyone is able to understand me. As you see, I have a brand new setup. I actually just moved from a one-bedroom apartment into a two-bedroom apartment, so I know my lighting isn't great, so I'm trying to work some things out. Last Saturday, I had a really good conversation with Bread of Life. We talked about messianic prophecies, and we spoke about textual criticisms within the New Testament. It was a great discussion, and I recommend everyone go out and see it.
All right, David, I appreciate that introduction. Your information and channel is linked in the description box. So anybody in the chat, if you guys like what you're seeing from David, check the description box and have a look at his channel. Dr. Dino, again, thank you for being here. I believe this is about your 36th time here. So you're no stranger to this platform. How you been? How's everything going on over at Dal? And a little bit about yourself.
Well, God is good. Some of God's kids drive me crazy, but God is good. Dinosaur Adventureland going great. We have visitors from all over the place. 2 guys from Germany here tonight. Guten Abend, right? How do you like the tour so far? Pretty cool around here, isn't it? Come on down, take the tour. Anyway, so yes, we're always having projects going here, a science center, museum, theme park, and we just want to win people to the Lord. Yesterday was my birthday into God's family. 53 years ago, I prayed and asked the Lord to save me and forgive me. And tonight is going to be David Neff's birthday. He's going to give his heart to the Lord tonight. We're going to work on him. Anyway, thank you for having me on again.
My pleasure. Happy spiritual birthday there, Dr. Dino. And again, thank you, Kent and David, for giving us your time for tonight's debate. Again, as more people make their way into the live chat, I see super stickers, super chats flying in already. Guys, thank you for the support. Also, make sure you're tagging me again with your questions. Okay, David, we're going to hand it over to you now. We're just going to get right into the debate here. Now that we got the introductions out of the way, you've got between 12 and 14 minutes. We'll be pretty easy going, and whatever time you use, we'll give Kent equal time. So whenever you're ready, I see your screen being shared now, so I'll put it up on screen. And the floor is yours.
All right. Well, thank you, Mr. Kent. I do really appreciate you debating me once again. Thank you, Standing, for having me, and it's good to see everyone in the audience. Just a quick announcement, there is an after show on my channel, so I hope everyone stops by. So what exactly is evolution? Evolution is the change in allele frequencies in the gene pool over successive generations. What happens when these gene pool changes? As a result of these changes, genetic change over many generations ultimately results in the emergence of new and different species from a single ancestral species. Thus, all known living terrestrial organisms are genealogically related. All existing species originated gradually by biological reproductive processes on a geological timescale. So the three main lines of evidence that I will be going over today is the age of the Earth, nested hierarchies, and statistics. So Kent Hovind uses this analogy. Imagine we find a shipwreck, and we want to know, when did this ship sink? And imagine we find some coins, and I want Kent Hovind's audience to help me out here. If we want to know when this ship sank, do we want to look for the oldest coin or the newest coin? Audience, what do you think? The answer is we want to look for the newest coin, because if we find a coin from 2018, we know that this ship had to sink after this coin was created, so 2018 would be our limiting factor. But what if we want to find a lower limiting factor? And we will do this too. So an upper limiting factor is the age of the universe. Earth cannot be older than the age of the universe. So if we can get a maximum age for the universe, we can establish a maximum age limit for the Earth. Using the Hubble constant and distant starlight, we calculate that the universe is about 13 billion years old. Thus, the Earth is no older than 13 billion years old. What about a lower limit? So Kent Hovind is 69 years old. He cannot be older than the Earth, so our minimum age for the Earth is 69 years old. Our next limiting factor is going to be continental drift. India is currently slamming into the Eurasian plate, and this is caused the Himalayan Mountains. And the Himalayan Mountains are still growing today. We can look through paleogeographical history, and we see that India broke off from Gondwana about 140 million years ago, and went about 5 centimeters a year towards Eurasia, and thus we have a minimum age of 120 million years. Our next is going to be the Aqua nuclear reactor. Natural uranium is 0.7 enriched, which would have been 3% enriched 2 billion years ago. Water plus 3% uranium equals fission. And this is what was predicted in 1965. And as our confirmation, in 1972, depleted uranium was found at Aqua, and they also found fission fragments. Now, 1972, the height of the Cold War, if we have missing uranium deposits, then you would be kind of worried if someone took them in order to start making nuclear weapons. But from here, we actually found no, this was actually as a result of a natural nuclear reactor, and it establishes a minimum age of 2 billion years old. Next,
David, let me just pause your timer here real quick.
Okay.
Because as I was gathering questions from the audience, I took a look at your slides and it looked like they weren't moving. You were still on your first slide. Okay, they're moving now. They're moving now.
Okay, so hold on a sec. Let me try this. Let's see here. I'm going to click there. Let's see if this works. This might be a little bit better. Try this. I'm going to give this a try. Okay, that's a lot better.
Yeah, now they're moving through.
Yeah, there we go. I'm going to use the StreamYard slide thing. This is going to be good. So just going to repeat what I said. Change in allele frequencies. So upper age of the Earth is 13 billion years old because the Earth cannot be older than the universe. Kent Hovind is going to be a minimum age. Kent Hovind cannot be older than the Earth. So Kent Hovind being 69 years old, the Earth cannot be younger than 69. India is currently causing the Himalayan Mountains to rise via tectonic plates. And we see that India broke off from Gondwana about 140 million years ago. So the minimum age from here is 120 million years. And we have Aqua, the natural limit, the lower limit of Aqua, 0.7 enriched uranium. And so from here, the Earth cannot be younger than 2 billion years old. Next, we have nested hierarchies. If evolution were true, then all species should be related to one another in nested hierarchies. So I think we can all agree that humans are mammals. Mammals are eukaryotic organisms within the kingdom Animalia that are warm-blooded vertebrates and have hair. I think we can agree that we are mammals. The question is, what kind of mammals are we? We are placental mammals. What type of placental mammals? We are Boroeutheria. And then I'm going to skip a couple of clades just because of brevity's sake. We are part of the primate clade. We have 2 forward-facing eyes, large brain size in relationship to bodies, and we have hands with opposable thumbs instead of paws. Thus, we are primates. What type of primates? We are Haplornini. We are primates. We are Hominidae. We are great apes. We are Hominini. We are the African hominins. And thus, we can go through, and this is the nested hierarchy that we see, and this is what we would expect if evolution were true. And next, we're going to get to biostatistics. And for this one, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I'm going to share actually a few papers, and I just have a couple of highlights here. Let's see if I can get to it real quick. Let's see here. I'm sorry. So here we did some statistical analysis on biological evolution. And the researchers here, even if for conservative tests, the probability that chance could produce the observed levels of ancestral convergence. So I'll just back up here. Basically what the paper is doing is they are testing separate ancestry with common ancestry and making predictions here. The separate ancestry is going to be our null hypothesis, and we're going to check which one makes the most sense. And here we have even our conservative tests, the probability by chance to produce the observed level of ancestral convergence by just one of the 8th data set of 51 proteins, which is a pretty large sample size, and it's 1 by 10 to the negative 19th, and combined over the 8 data sets is 1 by 10 to the negative 132. By comparison, there are about 10 to the 80 protons in the universe, hence the probability that the sequence could have been produced by a process involving unrelated ancestral sequence is about 10 to the 50 lower than picking among all protons, the same random proton twice in a row. A non-evolutionary control model shows no convergence, and only a small number of parameters are required to account for the observation. It is time that researchers insist on doubters to put up tests to the alternate for evolution. In the case of evolution, a strong prediction of Darwin's descent with modification is that as we go further and further back in time, the sequences for a given protein should become increasingly similar, which the researchers here call ancestral convergence. And this is exactly what we find. We have a huge sample size of various independent proteins in genetics, and we see exactly what we would expect under common ancestry. And just one more paper to share, and then I'll be done. Statistical evidence. Here we go.
Are you looking to screen share another paper, David?
Yeah, it's processing. Here we go.
Oh.
It's up here. Okay.
There it is.
So yeah, statistical evidence for evolution. We implemented statistical tests based on morphological, molecular, and biogeographical data, and developed 2 methods. One that tests for phylogenetic correctional while correcting for variation due to confounding ecological traits, and a method for examining whether fossil taxa have fewer derived differences than living taxa. We overwhelmingly reject both species and family separate ancestry with infinite small p-values. We compare these results with those from 2 other companion papers, which also found tremendously strong support for common ancestry of all primates, and discuss future directions and general philosophical issues that pertain to statistical testing of historical hypotheses such as common ancestry. So here they're basically doing similar tests using lines of evidence from molecular data, morphological data, biogeography, chromosome number, and they're actually testing statistically what makes the most sense. And given our interpretation of separate ancestry as a more parameter-poor model, the tests we have concluded in this article are fair. Occam's razor advises to prefer models with fewer parameters, except in cases where the data are significantly better explained by the more complex parameter-rich model. In such cases, where the more complex common ancestry model is much better at explaining diverse data sources, and the sound statistical conclusion that complex model is preferred to the simpler separate ancestry model. For this reason, the conclusion is that primate common ancestry is significantly preferred over separate ancestry, and is justified and unbiased scientific statistical calculations. Excuse me. So I look forward to engaging you on these arguments.
Is that the end of your opening statement there, David?
Yeah.
Okay, let me just double check the timer here. And 12 minutes. So right on the dot, we're going to hand it over to Dr. Dino here. And Ken, you have 12 minutes whenever you're ready.
Well, thank you, sir. I appreciate that. I thought we had made an agreement there would be no ad hominem attacks. He made sure to put up a slide about tax protesting and all that stuff. So please watch for that, Donnie. The Bible says 20 times in the first 7 chapters that the animals would bring forth after their kind, after their kind, after his kind, after his kind. Noah brought the animals onto the ark, 2 of every sort, after their kind. The Bible is very clear. Animals always produce after their kind. Now, keep in mind, no amount of evidence is going to convince those who are willingly ignorant, who don't want to believe the Bible, no matter how much evidence they see. We're not requiring that our beliefs of creation be taught in public schools at taxpayer expense. The burden of proof is on the evolutionist to prove their theory is true. Tonight, we're supposed to offer evidence for evolution. Is there reasonable evidence? My take on it is absolutely not, depending on what you mean by evolution. There is still no airtight definition of what exactly a species is, as of January 24th, the last time I looked it up. Plants and animals are moved to new classifications all the time, but in 99% of the cases, a 5-year-old can tell you it's the same kind of animal. Some are very difficult to classify. Duck-billed platypus, where does that go? It lays eggs. Okay. Animals that are hard to classify. Yeah, okay, there are several that are very hard to classify. Animals that are difficult to classify. Where are we going to put this? So they're still having a hard time today organizing creatures. Exactly what species should they be, and where should they be in their nested hierarchy that David talked about? But the fact that people have decided to classify things together does not mean the animals care about that. One person might organize their shop where all the metric tools are together and all the standard tools are together. Another person might say, no, I want them in a straight line according to size, where the 12 millimeters is just under the ½ inch. You can arrange it how you want. The wrenches don't care how you arrange them. Sometimes difficult to classify organisms. Some organisms may fall into multiple categories. Single-celled organism called euglena, which has characteristics of different groups. It has chloroplasts like plants. It doesn't have a cell wall like animals, but has a flagella like many bacteria. Where are we going to put it? I don't think they care. The fact is, in most of the cases, some things are difficult to classify, but 99% of them can easily be classified, and they bring forth after their kind. There is no evidence anywhere in the world or anywhere in history where an animal has gotten out of its nested hierarchy and gone to a different kind of animal. No farmer in history has ever recorded a plant or animal producing anything other than its kind. So we have, with selective breeding, developed lots of varieties within the kind, lots of branches on the tree, but the branches don't go over to the other rest of the forest, which, like the evolutionists believe. No fossil evidence could ever count as evidence for evolution, because you can't prove fossils had any children at all. No fossils count. And there is no fossil record, okay? You cannot prove it lived, or get up to something else here. But yet they put on the family trees they make all the time for our textbooks that humans and starfish and coral have a common ancestor. with worms. I think this is absolute pure propaganda. Somebody drew lines on paper. If humans and sea sponges are different, when the sponge slowly changed to a human, did it become a different species many times? David is real big about saying that animals cannot get out of their classification. Well, apparently they did if they went from an amoeba. Do you really believe a human came from a protista? Is that part of science? They make these family trees with the birds and the dinosaurs and the worms having a common ancestor with the sharks and the clams. I think that's pure propaganda. My position is there is no evidence in history. There is no evidence in the laboratory. There's no evidence in farmers by the thousands, by the millions, observing animals or plants producing after their kind. There is no evidence for evolution. There are 250 recognized breeds of cows. They might have had a common ancestor called a cow. Okay? There are hundreds of varieties of corn, and they might have had a common ancestor called corn. 12,000 species of grass in the grass family. They got some pretty cool looking corn, the glass gem corn. We got to get some of those here. Black corn, red corn. And they might have all come from maize. But that does not mean corn is related to elephants, which is what David does believe. And I'll get him to admit that later. You do believe elephants and corn are related, don't you, David? Okay, because it's on the charts in your textbooks. They got everything connected with these lines. The corn and the octopus have a common ancestor. Well, there's 300 types of octopus in the world, and they might have had a common ancestor. I don't know. But that sure doesn't prove they're related to corn. Showing the hundreds of varieties of corn does not prove lions and whales and dinosaurs and humans have a common ancestor. But this is what the kids have to face in their textbooks every day. And after they've heard this propaganda from kindergarten, first grade, second grade, third grade, eventually they start to believe it. And apparently David got brainwashed by his science book, or by somebody. You've been brainwashed by your book? Yeah, he got brainwashed into believing everything's related. 200 varieties of wheat might have had a common ancestor. 4,000 varieties of potatoes might have had a common ancestor. 300 and some breeds of dogs might have had a common ancestor. Most would not survive in the wild. Got to babysit them to keep them alive and keep protecting them to keep them alive, but they might have had a common ancestor, a dog. Bible says they'll bring forth after their kind, and Charlie Darwin wrote a book and called it Origin of Species. Well, now, we might decide to classify it as a different species, but that doesn't mean it's a different kind. So, David, what is the best example you know of for any animal producing an offspring or plant that anybody with a brain would consider a totally different kind? Or does it only happen in the imagination over millions of generations, over millions of years where we can't watch it? If it happens, pick something that gives a short generation time like bacteria, 20-minute generation time, get born, grow up, get married, have kids in 20 minutes. We ought to be able to see some evolution there. Why do they always produce bacteria without exception? So they bring forth after their kind. The horse and the zebra might have had a common ancestor. The little bitty miniature horses might have had a common ancestor with the big ones, but it was a horse. Zorses, zonkies, zeonies, zedonks all had a common ancestor, I believe. A horse, a big hoof on each foot, nose on the front, tail on the back. I think they had a common ancestor. So there's a herd of zebroids running around. Anyway, we go through all this in my seminar. There are 7,500 varieties of apples. Might have had a common ancestor, an apple. How many types of oak trees are there? Oh man, gee whiz, a bunch. Let's see, 600 types of oaks. Wow, we got a bunch here in the United States. Oaks evolved to rule the forests of northern hemisphere. Oaks have branches that go out, and they always stay oak. If the branch overlaps the cherry tree, that doesn't mean they're related. You guys have these branches of dogs and the branches of potatoes and say, see, this proves potatoes and dogs are related. This is dumb, real dumb, okay? Genomes and fossils reveal their remarkable evolutionary history. No, they don't. Fossils can't tell you anything. Anyway, we cover all this in my seminar. So Darwin sailed around the world and stopped off on these islands, the Galapagos Islands, and there he looked at the birds. He shot all the birds he could find. He hated birds because he liked worms, kind of a strange fellow. But he said there were 14 varieties of finches on these islands. And he concluded, probably correctly, that the finches had a common ancestor, a finch. I would agree with that. The Grants went down there, spent 10 years and who knows how much government money to do a study on the finches. They found out during dry years, the finch's beak is thicker. Yeah, because only the tough nuts that are tough to crack are left during dry years. And so they got to have a tough beak to survive. So the ones with the skinny beak can't eat and they die. And pretty soon all of them got a tough beak. It didn't change the beak to anything other than a beak. That's not evolution. Peter and Rosemary Grant, distinguished for their long-term studies of demonstrating evolution. They didn't demonstrate evolution at all. I'll debate both of them with half my brain tied behind my back and every other atheist you can find. All they demonstrated was natural selection works. It selects. It doesn't create anything. There are lots of different finches in the world, 228 species of finches. Might have had a common ancestor. Darwin's 14 varieties of finches might have had a common ancestor, a bird. But in Darwin's book, he talked about how everything was related because of that study. No, Charlie, when you see 14 kinds of birds, you ought to conclude maybe the birds are related to the birds. See, microevolution, this is where the problem comes in. Microevolution is a bad word. We should not use that, but they do, so I'll explain it. That means there's variations within the kind. That happens. We all observe that. Every farmer observes that. But you guys want to believe that that is somehow evidence for macroevolution, which it is not. Dogs produce a dog, and they're always with dog, and there's a limit. You might get a little one or a big one, but there's a limit in size. You're never going to get a dog as big as an elephant, even though there are animals as big as an elephant, like an elephant. And you're never going to get a dog as small as a flea, even though there are animals as small as a flea. So we covered all this before. Let's see. So National Geographic said dogs and wolves probably had a common ancestor. I agree. Look like a dog. Hair on the outside, nose on the front, a dog. 500 types of chickens. Humpback whales always make baby humpback whales. Same for the killer whale, the fin whale, the gray whale, the pilot whale, etc. It's imagination to dream that these are all related. But the textbook shows the kids the cow and the hippo and the camel and the whale have a common ancestor. This is dumb, and this, I think, is borderline criminal to lie to kids to get them to believe your theory. Evolution is imagination. There's a family tree of dogs and a family tree of apples and a family tree of octopus. But you guys want to connect them all in your imagination. Say, oh, wow, they're all related. Look at that, boys and girls. Octopus and apples are related. This is dumb. And you want to throw in everything. Chickens, corn, everything related. When whales walked on land, this is just imagination. The Bible says they'll bring forth after their kind, after their kind, after their kind. Even the fishes will declare that. They bring forth after their kind. Our bass in our lake produce bass. The crappie produce crappie. No exceptions, none. And if you can't figure out which one, if one's actually the same species, ask the males. They'll figure it out. Turn all the animals in the world loose. The male rabbits will only seek out the female rabbits. They're not the least bit interested in the pine trees. They'll tell you which ones are the same kind, okay, if we can't figure it out. The males all seem to know which female is the right kind, even if humans cannot figure it out. Watch our ducks on the lake out there, okay? Watch the moose go after the mama moose. He don't go after the rabbit. The male fish goes after the female fish without exception. Lions never fight. They fight over mating rights with anyone but the female. They don't fight over mating rights with the pine tree or the oak tree. It's simple. Bible says, beware lest any man spoil you through philosophy. Evolution is a philosophy. It's a religion. It's not science. It's something people believe in because that's what they've been taught. And it is capital D, dumb. There you go. 12 minutes. Thank you, sir.
All right. I appreciate that opening statement there, Dr. Hovind. That concludes the opening statements from Kent and David. Let's make sure the remainder of the debate is free from ad hominem attacks. Let's keep it professional, cordial. The chat is wild. We've got over 230 people in the chat right now. So I'm doing my best to sift through all the comments and save all the questions. So I do at times miss slides and certain things said. So let's keep this professional and move on in a way that makes sure this debate is professional and sophisticated. So we're going to hand it over to David Neff now. And David, you have an 8-minute rebuttal. Whatever's not used, we'll toss into the discussion portion. So David, make sure you unmute yourself. And whenever you're ready, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I'm just waiting for my PowerPoint to come up. Yep. All right. Well, thank you once again, Mr. Kent, for that opening statement. So I want you to do 3 things tonight. Number 1, prove you know what you're talking about. Explain how your model better fits the data better than our model. And most importantly, prove that you're willing to argue in good faith. I want to warn you, Mr. Kent. The Bible says that God hateth a lying tongue, and Revelation 21:8, all liars shall have their part in the lake which burneth with fire. Kent, you like to use straw man. You like to throw out a bunch of nonsense like why we don't see a Baal in the fossil record. You like to say silly things like the fossil record doesn't exist. And these are objectively false, and I think you know it. And so I just want to have you discuss a couple of questions with you. You allege that a global flood wiped out all but two of every kind of animal only 4,500 years ago and landed on Mount Ararat in Turkey. This poses a number of problems. Mount Ararat is a dormant volcano that last erupted in the 1800s. You also argued that the mountains formed during the flood. How do you land a wooden boat on a freshly warmed volcano? How do you safely disembark all the animals? How do you properly ventilate such a massive ship? And why don't we see evidence of this mass extinction in our genetics? So what type of natural selection do these graphs show? I was asking you some very basic things about natural selection, and you didn't seem to know what they were, which is quite funny, given that you have been preaching the same script since well before I was born. Question number 3, can you compare and contrast allopatric speciation with sympatric speciation? Explain the Hardy-Weinberg principle of equilibrium and the 5 criteria that must be met. Explain why evolution would prohibit a Baal. Why do you call yourself a doctor when you have 0 legitimate degrees? Explain how microevolution could result in the formation of hundreds of new species in a few decades following the global flood, which would be required under your model. Explain why the Big Bang Theory has nothing to do with evolution. You like to group a whole bunch of unrelated theories together and say that the theory of evolution is a theory on life, universe, and everything, which is not true. That's another one of your falsehoods, and you know it. Question number 9. Explain on the biochemical and molecular level why it is impossible for humans and chimpanzees to share a common ancestor. And finally, explain what would count as a change in kind. I want to address some of the things that you spoke about in your opening statements. Number 1, you said that there's no definition for a species, which is kind of what we would expect if evolution were the case. However, I would say that there's no definition for the word kind either. You can ask a whole bunch of different creationists what a kind is and where it would fall on the taxonomic scale, and you would get a whole bunch of different answers. Answers in Genesis themselves. They sometimes it's at a family level, sometimes it's a genus, sometimes it could be a species. So it really all depends. You asked for, you said nested hierarchy, kind of changing kind of animal. Again, what would you accept as a change in kind? When we look at the nested hierarchy, when we look through the clades that humans belong to, at no point did one kind of animal fundamentally change to a different kind of animal. And again, that's just another one of your straw man. What we do see is that as species diverge further and further apart, they each develop unique characteristics. And eventually these unique characteristics will distinguish themselves from one another. So you asked what would count as like one animal changing into something we would recognize as a different kind of animal. I would recommend, I'm just going to go to viruses because it's easier. SIV evolved into HIV. HIV, the human immunodeficiency virus, evolved from SIV and evolved sometime in the early 1900s. But didn't become a pandemic until the 1980s, so almost 80 years before it actually became a pandemic. That certainly would count, in my opinion, as a complete change in kind. Let's see here. That's all that I wanted to kind of address in the rebuttal section, but hopefully we can engage further in the open discussion.
All right, we got 3 minutes to spare. 3 minutes we can throw into the discussion portion. I see questions flying in. Just make sure you're tagging me at Standing for Truth. And again, let's make sure we're attacking arguments and not the debaters. There may have been a couple questionable things during that rebuttal, but we'll see how it goes from here. So we're going to hand it over to Dr. Dino, and you have 8 minutes as well. Whenever you're ready, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, sir. It's obvious David does not understand the rules and cannot follow them. He is not to be ad hominem, and yet he tried to change it to I'm not a doctor. What does that have to do with it? I could be a garbage man. What the topic of the debate is, where is the evidence for evolution? He did not provide any. Instead, he tried to switch the topic to Noah's Ark and the landing on Mount Ararat. That's got nothing. I don't have to prove that. He's got to prove. He wants everybody to pay for his religion to be taught in the schools. The burden of proof is on him. Now, quit changing the subject, David, and stick on the topic. If the best evidence you have is an HIV virus turning into an HIV virus, I think that's not evidence for evolution, that viruses turned into humans and whales and bananas. I showed clearly there is no evidence anywhere in history or anywhere in the current scientific research or anywhere in the world of any animal producing a plant or animal other than its kind. And you mentioned what's a species, what's a kind? Like I said, ask the males. They can figure it out pretty quickly. Duh. You guys have supposed to have evidence from the fossil record. I've pointed out many times there is no such thing as a fossil record. There is no fossil record. There's a lot of fossils, but there's no fossil record. Let me get to that one here. Homologous structures is evidence they usually use because we have similar bone structure to other animals. Well, that could prove a common designer. Fords have 4 wheels rolling on the ground, so do Chevys. Oh, that proves something. Yeah, it's a design that works. That's what it proves. That homology does not offer any evidence for evolution. Vestigial structures, first of all, there aren't any, but if there were, that would be the opposite of evolution. Then they talk about selective breeding. That works, but all you get is a selection of what was already existing. You can select for smaller dogs or bigger dogs, but you have to have it already in the gene pool. Tell you what, selectively breed your dogs until you get a bird. It's not available. That gene stuff is not available in the dog population to get a bird. They show the supposed evidence for evolution with Pakicetus and Rhodocetus. All these animals are supposed to be evidence for evolution from the fossils. There are no transitional fossils. There are animals that are kind of strange, hard to classify sometimes, but there are no transitions. Let me get to slide number. Let's see, right. I got too many things going at once here. There, okay. There, 801, okay. Alt-DV, 801, okay. No, I apologize. Got too many things going at once here. Alt-DV, 801, enter. Yeah, I'll just use up my time on something else. So the topic of the debate is there evidence for evolution? I have said absolutely not. I'd like to see it. If the HIV virus has developed a resistance to certain antibiotics or virus killers that they give it, it's still a virus. Is that the best you have? Do you think that process of a virus or a bacteria developing resistance to some kind of drug is going to change it to something else? This is not adding any new information. It's selecting information that's already there. If we went around smacking all the bugs with a hammer and one of them had a really tough shell and he could handle the hammer hit on the back, well, then he's probably the only one going to get to pass on babies to the next generation. So pretty soon all the bugs have a tough shell. Well, it's only because that one already had a tough shell. It didn't add the shell. It didn't create wings. It just made it tough to crack with a hammer. So all we've ever seen is variations within the same kind. Nobody has ever seen any animal produce a different kind of animal. If you wish to believe that, you can believe that. You typically talk about the whale having a vestigial pelvis and about fossilization taking millions of years. The whales do not have a vestigial pelvis. Fossils don't take millions of years to form. Here's a fossil pickle from our museum. Here's a fossil teddy bear. There's a place in Czechoslovakia where the water falls about 8 feet and splashes all over. So then they put things around that little pool where it splashes in, and everything gets a hard crust on it, fossilizes in a week or two. They have fossilized coil of rope, fossilized cowboy hat. In Georgia, they found a tree, a hollow tree with a fossilized dog stuck up in it. Chased a squirrel up there or something, got stuck. They named it Stucky. It's at the museum there, Southern Forest World Museum. So I think it's the flood is the best and only explanation that's logical for why we have fossils at all. Animals die today by the millions and none of them fossilize. The Bible says the scoffers at the end of time would be willingly ignorant of the creation and the flood and the coming judgment of God. Now, David, you fit right into that category. I think you ought to give it up. Evolution is a dumb religion. You got brainwashed. I'm sorry. I'm here to help. So God made everything in 6 days. That's the only way all the trillions of symbiotic relationships work. Plants breathe in CO2, give off oxygen. Pretty handy. Animals breathe in oxygen, give off CO2 so the plants can breathe. Wow. How long did that take to evolve? The reciprocation of the gases. There are trillions of symbiotic relationships I think defy an evolutionary explanation. Much better to say, look, it must have been designed that way. The lug nuts on my car fit the lugs. Whoa, must have been designed. The tires fit the rims. Whoa, I bet that was designed too. The windshield fits the hole in the front. Oh, I bet that was designed. There are thousands of things on your car that are designed to fit where they go. I think it's just some people don't want to give God the glory. I don't know what to say to them. I feel sorry for them. They're missing out on getting to know the greatest God, the only God of the universe. He's my dad, my friend. He saved me, forgave me. I'm his child. You can be too. Okay, we need to get to Q&A, and he asked a bunch of questions, and I won't get time to answer them. I don't see the question anymore anyway, but I'd be glad to. But most of them are off the topic of him giving evidence for evolution. So, Donnie, if you could moderate that. If they really are asking for about evidence for evolution, I'd like to answer those on this debate. We can do another one on Noah's Ark if you'd like. The Bible doesn't say the ark landed on Mount Ararat, the volcano. It says it landed in the mountains of Ararat. There's a bunch of them. It landed between them. I think it's still there. Go to WyattMuseum.com. You can see pictures of it. It's not on Mount Ararat at all. So again, off topic, but that's a short answer to your question, David. Okay, go ahead.
I appreciate that there, Kent. And that was about 8 minutes. So that concludes the rebuttals. And we have now completed the openings and the rebuttals for tonight's debate. We are moving into the open discussion. Guys, let's keep it professional while we discuss one point at a time and answer one relevant question at a time, relevant question to the debate. Of course, I want to keep this free-flowing and organic, but I will moderate as needed and make sure that, again, we're dealing with the arguments and not attacking the debaters. So what we'll do, since Kent just ended with his rebuttal, David, why don't we hand it over to you to kind of kick us off in this open discussion with the first question or first point you'd like to make? Go ahead.
Sure. I guess the first point I want to make is that is not a fossil teddy bear. That is a concretion. That is not fossilization. That is concretion. That is not a fossilized teddy bear.
Is that a question you're asking me, David?
That I wanted to respond to. That's just something that I wanted to respond to.
Well, ask your question. This is question answer time. What's your question?
All right. So why isn't SIV changing into HIV an example of macroevolution? I guess we can start there.
Oh, I thought you were asking about the teddy bear, or you want to slap and run on that one?
I just wanted to make a statement. My first statement was that this is not a
I said very clearly, there's a place in Czechoslovakia where it's high mineral content water. It splashes over a little waterfall. Everything around it gets a rock coating on it. This has a coating of rock. It was formed in just a few weeks. Fossilization is where, as the cells of a mineral, of any plant or animal, as they decay, minerals soak in, harden, and replace the cell. It's called replacement fossilization. So this pickle is indeed fossilized pickle, turned to solid stone. The pickle cells have been replaced by minerals. That's what petrified wood is. It's replaced. This petrified clam in the closed position has been replaced by rocks and minerals. There's no clam left here, but it's a perfect outline of a petrified closed clam. So yes, I understand the difference between fossilization and mineralization. This is technically a coating of the same kind of stuff that would be on the inside if they left it go long enough, fossilize all the way through. It would turn to stone all the way through. Let me clarify that. So, okay, now your other question about HIV, David, did it start off as a virus and end up as a virus?
Yeah, for the same reason that we started as a eukaryote and still are eukaryotes. That is that is very like saying that it's still a eukaryote.
I'm sorry, David, I cannot understand a word you are saying. Would you quit reading and talk and enunciate?
I'm not reading, Kent.
Okay,
And
articulate then. I'm not understanding it.
Okay, what if I get closer to my microphone? Is this any better?
I don't need you louder. I need you to talk clearly. So
Okay.
It's a HIV virus is still a virus, and is that evidence to you that whales are related to bananas?
Well, first off, HIV still being a virus, that's kind of the point. That's literally how the nested hierarchies work. And we wouldn't expect it to become anything other than a virus. And it's literally like saying that a human is still a eukaryote. Humans are eukaryotes. And it's like saying, well, it's still a eukaryote or it's still a bacteria. That's literally what you're arguing. So again, why isn't HIV from SIV macroevolution? Because this is a completely different type of virus. This is definitely the definition of macroevolution.
Well, if a virus turns to a virus, that is not going to be evidence that a virus could produce. You yourself have said many times the law of monophyly. It can never produce outside of what it is. But yet this virus somehow produced a whale over billions of years, didn't it, David? Do you believe?
That's another one. That is one of your falsehoods. That's one of your falsehoods. You're lying again, Kent. And you know it. Because again, that is not how evolution works. That is not
David,
how this works.
You're supposed to be giving evidence for evolution. This chart, taught to kids by the millions all over America and all over the world, shows every form of life coming from a common ancestor. And your evidence for that is a virus turning into a virus. I think you need more than that, sir.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that one more time?
You said HIV virus turned into a different kind of virus that is now resistant to something. Okay.
No,
I agree.
HIV is completely different from SIV. It's not just resistant to a couple things. It is actually a brand new type of virus.
They're both, David, they're both viruses. Virus. Is this evidence? Do you believe that a virus is related to a whale?
No, viruses do not share common ancestors with cellular life.
Okay. Do you believe amoebas are related to whales?
Yes, they do share a common ancestor.
Okay. Share a common ancestor. Where is the evidence for that? That's the purpose of this debate. Why would you believe a whale and an amoeba have a common ancestor when you yourself said the law of monophyly? So amoebas can only produce amoebas. They can never produce anything other than amoeba. But yet you think you're talking out of both sides of your mouth. Did the amoeba produce something that was non-amoeba, that it slowly came to be a whale? Had to be a trillions of changes. There's a big difference between a whale and an amoeba, David. Do you believe in the law of monophyly or not?
Yes, I do.
Well, then the amoebas can only produce amoebas.
Okay, and?
Stop saying the amoeba turned to a whale.
I'm not saying that an amoeba turned into a whale. That's another one of your lies.
Well, don't stop calling me a liar, too. Look at this chart, David. They're showing an amoeba turning into all kinds of life forms, including the whale up there near the top on the left side. So the books in school are teaching the amoeba turned into a whale. So I'm not lying. You're not understanding, but the whale is not, the law of monophyly would say amoebas can only produce amoebas. You either don't understand what the law of monophyly is, or you don't really believe it, but you believe somehow over trillions of generations that amoeba turned into, let's see, a starfish, a whale, a crawdad, a dinosaur, a human, and a bird. They're all on the chart. Do you believe this chart represents reality, that all life forms have a common ancestor?
I think all life forms share a common ancestor. And
well, then you don't believe in the law of monophyly.
No, I do believe in the law of monophyly. Can you actually define what monophyly is? Yes, I agree. Face palm. I agree.
I don't understand, son.
Why are you calling me son?
Oh, brother. Okay. I'm sorry. David, bacteria, amoebas, only produce amoebas. Only. Law of monophyly. But you believe amoebas slowly turned into all these things on the chart. So you're either a liar or you're dumb and can't understand, which you don't see the same. You're talking out of both sides of your mouth. The law of monophyly is exactly what the Bible would say. They bring forth after their kind. Dogs produce dogs, always. Whales produce whales. Amoeba produce amoeba. This whole chart is stupid. No common sense behind this to say that amoeba has turned into all these animals. But a kid in first grade and second grade and third grade is going to see this and think it's true because, after all, it's in my science book. And it's propaganda. It's lying to the children. Amoebas produce amoebas. Where is the evidence of an amoeba ever producing something that's non-amoeba, other than in your imagination, where it turned into all this stuff in the chart? Where's the scientific evidence?
Look, a modern-day amoeba did not turn into all the other animals we see alive today. That is, again, another one of your straw man. Again, one of the things that I wanted you to do is prove that you're willing to have an honest discussion, which you are not doing. You're literally trying to straw man, and that is the name of your game. You're doing nothing but...
David, stop. It's not a straw man. It's the fact. Amoebas produce amoebas. The Bible says 20 times animals bring forth after their kind. I would assume that applies to amoebas also. Nobody's ever seen an amoeba produce a non-amoeba, but the chart shows the amoeba turning into a whale. And you said you believed that. David, that's violating the law of monophyly. How can you not see that?
Can you blow that up a little bit, because I want to see the thing. Sandy, can you put that in full screen mode so I can see it a little bit better?
Let's see. I'll move it up. Okay. Here we have the origin of life, an amoeba at the bottom turning into everything on the chart, including, look at that, elephant, whale, hippopotamus, giraffe, camel. David, do you believe humans and giraffes have a common ancestor that was an amoeba?
No, I believe they shared a common ancestor, but I don't think it was an amoeba. Go down all the way back down to the very bottom of the tree.
Okay, do you believe it was a single-celled creature of some kind?
Yeah, well, go back. Can you zoom back into the origins of life there? Can you zoom back in there so I can see it a little bit better?
Oh, zoom. What do you want me to zoom in on the bottom? Oh,
yeah.
Oh, Donnie's doing it?
There we go.
Okay.
So,
I got a full screen.
Yeah, sure. So amoebas are by definition eukaryotes. So an amoeba could not be the common ancestor of both humans and bacteria. So an amoeba was definitely not the first form of life. But one of the things that I like to do is start with humans and start going backwards from there to from the top down to the bottom. Humans do, in fact, share a common ancestor with chimpanzees, bonobos, and gorillas. This is pretty well supported by molecular data, fossil evidence, and ERVs, all that type of stuff. So again, can I ask you a question? What would you accept as a change in kind?
I don't think there's ever been one. Show me your best example. Like I said, the males can figure out if they're the same kind. We've seen a lot of varieties of potatoes produced by farmers. We've seen a lot of varieties of dogs produced. Most of the varieties that man has produced, whether it be corn or cows, wouldn't survive in nature. They got to babysit them now. They get cows that give more milk, cows that give more beef, but they're still cow. I've never seen, I don't think anybody in history has ever seen an example of what you guys believe in, that an animal can produce outside of its kind.
Again, what is a kind?
I went through that over and over. What is a species? I said there's never been a good solid definition of species. Things change all the time. But a 5-year-old can tell you 99.99% of the time that it's the same kind.
Okay,
you believe
so a question for you. Are chimpanzees, bonobos, and gorillas, are they the same kind, or are they different kinds?
I think gorillas are different than humans. I don't think there's any normal human that's interested in a gorilla or any normal.
That's not what I'm asking. That's not what I'm asking. What I am asking is, are chimpanzees, bonobos, and gorillas, are they the same kind?
Chimpanzees and gorillas are not the same kind. They never crossbreed. Do they ever crossbreed?
No. But again, there are animals that you consider separate kind, the same kind, that cannot crossbreed. So there are, of course, ring species that eventually they can interbreed with the neighboring species, but they can't interbreed with the others. I think in one of your seminars, you brought up.
Hold it, one at a time. You asked me if I thought gorillas, and I think your question was gorillas and chimpanzees. No, they're a different kind. They're similar to humans in some ways, but
Okay.
So what?
Okay, so what about chimpanzees and bonobos? Are they the same kind or no?
I didn't understand a word of that.
Are chimpanzees and bonobos the same kind?
Chimpanzees and what?
And bonobos.
Bonobos.
I'm not sure how they would, if they can interbreed or not. That's a good question. There's plenty of places where it's a little fuzzy. But I'd say chimpanzee and bananas are not the same kind. That's pretty obvious.
So the question is, and then you'll see where this is going. Are pumas and tigers the same kind, part of the cat kind, or are they different kinds?
I'm so sorry.
And tigers?
Yeah, pumas and tigers, are they the same kind? Are they part of the same cat kind?
Well, I think pumas, tigers, lions, cats, bobcat, lynx, jaguar are certainly classified in the cat family. Does that prove, because I don't know how many kinds of cats God made, but I don't think the cats can interbreed with the oak trees.
Okay, so again, but of course a puma and a tiger can't interbreed with each other, and neither can interbreed with the house cats. But most creationists, every creationist that I spoke to, would all agree that they're part of the same cat kind. So interbreeding obviously is not a good test for whether or not they're the same kind, because different species within a quote-unquote kind might not be able to interbreed with each other. I mean, a gray wolf isn't going to be able to interbreed with a chihuahua, but you would of course say that they're the same kind.
Okay, go ahead, Ken.
It could be that the branches of the tree, like the Chihuahua and the Great Dane, both branches on the dog tree, reach the point where they cannot interbreed, mostly for mechanical reasons in that case. But they're still a dog. A 5-year-old can tell you. And a puma. Wait a minute.
Well, just 1 second. Yeah. Go ahead, Ken. Equal time. Go ahead.
A puma and a lion are still a cat. Whether they can interbreed or not, I don't know. Maybe they could be forced to, or at least the genes could be combined. But they're still a cat. Try to combine the genes of a puma with a whale and see what happens. Both will be very upset with you.
Yes, indeed. So again, you're using two different definitions of kind. You seem to say one thing, that a kind are those that can interbreed. But then you accept animals within different kinds that cannot interbreed. So you're kind of speaking out of both sides of your mouth. Some kinds can interbreed with each other. Sometimes kinds cannot interbreed with each other. Which is it?
David, you're supposed to be giving evidence for evolution. Is your evidence that a puma and a lion, or whatever cat you said, that might possibly be able to interbreed? Some of the modern man has classified them differently. There's kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. Certainly the lion and the puma are different species. Are they in the same genus? Are they in the same class, order, family? At some point, sure, they're all in the cat family. Now, does that evidence that there's, let's say, 20 different varieties of cats in the cat family at that classification level that modern man has put on them? They don't care what level we put on them. Okay, they don't care what name we call them. But is that evidence that whales are related to cats? In your mind, do you believe whales are related to cats, David?
Yes, I do think that they share a common ancestor. But again, you're not answering my question, and that question is directly related to the evidence that I want to give. So again, you say that bonobos and chimpanzees and gorillas cannot be the same kind because they cannot interbreed. But then you, out of the same side of your mouth, you say that, okay, you can have species within a kind that cannot interbreed. So which is it? And then you'll see where this is going.
I wish you would enunciate. I'm getting about half of your words here. You said something about bonobos, chimpanzees, and gorillas are different kind. I think that's a good field of research, where that's what all classification scientists do. Try to classify, where does this one fit? And like I mentioned, sometimes they got to move them around. Where does the platypus fit? Where does the starfish fit? Where does the seahorse fit? So it's common to move creatures around, but they don't care where we put them. Modern man is spending a lot of time and energy and government money trying to classify things and put them into which class they go in. I don't think the puma cares. I don't think the chimpanzee cares. I know this. You turn them all loose in the woods, the chimpanzee males are going to seek out the chimpanzee females, not the gorilla females. So I think they know they're not the same kind. I think that this is, if that's your evidence for evolution, that it's difficult to classify some things, you're failing the purpose of this debate. You're supposed to show us evidence that you think all these life forms have a common ancestor, because they sure teach that to the kids in the school. That's what's taught. I would agree. There's varieties of humans. Some have black skin, some have white skin, some are light skin, some have red skin, some have yellow, some have slanted eyes, but they're all still human, all capable of interbreeding, and they're still human. That is, can humans and chimpanzees mate, or can you even do it in the laboratory? Can you take the sperm or egg from either one and make them combine and produce a half human, half ape? Can that be done, David?
Of course not. And such an experiment would be unethical. Now, Standing, are you able to understand me, or are you having problems understanding me as well? Because I want to make sure I'm being understood.
No, I can hear you right now.
Okay.
I can hear him, but I cannot understand him. You mumble. Talk clearly. What was your question again?
My question again. I do want to apologize, since I do legitimately have speech impediment and speech issues. So I'm trying to speak as clearly as I can.
Okay, thank you, sir. I understand that.
Again, you're kind of swarming around and squealing around the definition of what I'm asking you for, and I want to pin you down for a reason. I want to pin you down on the definition of kind, because if I can get a good definition of kind, then I can find can hopefully find a good example of changing a kind. So again, what is a kind, and what would you accept as a change in kind? At one side of your mouth, organisms cannot be of the same kind because they can't inbreed. But then you're saying that species can be the same kind despite the fact that they cannot interbreed. So you're kind of using both definitions here, whatever one suits you the best.
Well, the Bible says if they can bring forth, they're the same kind. You cannot crossbreed a chimpanzee with a human, even in the laboratory. Get the sperm or egg from either one and crossbreed it with the sperm from the other one. It won't match. It won't start life form. So I certainly think there's a clear evidence that humans and chimpanzees are not the same kind. I mean, that's the Bible says they can bring forth after their kind. That's what we've got. Nobody knows for sure exactly how to classify all the animals in species level. I've told you many times, and I'll tell you one more time. I don't think anybody can give a solid definition of the word kind that'll match every single example, because we're not sure, but 99% of them can easily be classified as the same kind. Humans and chimps cannot crossbreed, even in the laboratory. Therefore, they are the same kind. They are not the same kind. Now, can a lion and a tiger crossbreed? Yes. Are they the same species? No. Are they the same kind? Apparently, yes. It's called a cat. Hair on the outside, tail on the back, a cat. And every 5-year-old would tell you they're in the cat family. So they normally don't interbreed. Now, are they two branches on the tree of cat? Maybe. Maybe they had a common ancestor that looked like a cat. But to say a lion and a tiger can crossbreed and make a ligon or a tigon or liger, that is not proof that whales are related to amoeba. You want to kind of confuse and muddy the water about exactly what is a kind, when you're missing the major point. Because we can't classify everything precisely, which is what scientists have been doing for centuries, some are tough to classify. I've said that many times. Therefore, in your mind, because we can't get a definition of kind that's rock solid, therefore, whales and amoebas have a common ancestor. I don't know how you can't see how dumb that is, David. Go ahead. Okay,
so it looks like I got you on here. So a kind here, as you defined here, is a population that can interbreed. So when a population is no longer interbreeding, that means that they are no longer the same kind, correct?
So you're saying if we two branches on the tree, like the Chihuahua and the Great Dane, for example, let's assume they cannot interbreed anymore. Therefore, are they different kinds? Well, they're still dog. Would they be classified as a different species? Probably not. But it's all semantics. They're still, a 5-year-old will tell you, yeah, that's the same kind of animal. That's a big dog. That's a little dog. So, but they can't interbreed anymore. Well, I'm sorry. That's their problem. But that doesn't prove anything has changed. That does not prove single-celled creatures have evolved into whales and bananas and everything else, because it's the law of monophyly. You said you believe the law of monophyly. I don't think you believe the law of monophyly, David.
And David, I want to give you an opportunity to respond, but I just wanted to make a recommendation in the last several minutes of the Q&A or discussion portion here, David, if you wanted to respond to that, but then also present what you believe a line of evidence would be that is convincing for universal ancestry. And we can engage that a little bit, whether it's nested hierarchies, I know you look to that, or ERVs or something like that, but it's up to you. Go ahead.
Yeah, that sounds great. So we'll talk a little bit next about various things. So I want to be very clear. Kent Hovind demonstrated, I want the audience to know this, Kent Hovind demonstrated that he cannot give a definition for kind. And his definition of kind is quite slippery, and it depends on what sometimes he can interbreed, sometimes he cannot interbreed. So based upon Kent Hovind's definition, I can't show any change in kind, which is what Kent Hovind wants me to show, because he can't even define what a kind is. So I want everyone to make that as a note. Kent Hovind cannot define what a kind is. Okay,
let's give Ken. Okay, go ahead, Ken, if you want to respond to that.
That is not the purpose of the debate, but if you want to go there, look up the word species on biology. A kind or sort. What is a species? A group of individuals that actually or potentially interbreed in nature. Definition of species as a group of interbreeding individuals. Okay. Biology, a group of living organisms consisting of similar individuals capable of exchanging genes or interbreeding. Species, a kind or sort. Kind, type, sort, genus, family, order, breed, race. People ask, what's a species? Simple definition. A group of organisms that can reproduce with one another in nature and produce fertile offspring. Are the lion and tiger able to produce fertile offspring? That might be another thing to wrinkle to throw in the sheets here. What is a species? An example. Common characteristics that are classified as alike in some manner. How many definitions of species are there? There are 7 distinct definitions of species and 27 variations and mixtures. How do you explain species to a child? What are the 3 types of species, 4 types, 7 types? Why is it difficult to define species? It's hard to define species because it's hard to define when a population of organisms can or cannot reproduce. Classification system. In the 18th century, they made this thing up. Kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. So the science of taxonomy is far from dead. It's hotly disputed today. Arguments are fierce, and species do change names, but only after a wealth of information has been gathered. One of the new reasons why species are being reevaluated is because of DNA analysis. Classification system has existed for 300 years. It's constantly evolving. Let's see, scientists are debating which species are most closely related and why. This is an ongoing debate. But you are saying because we cannot nail it down, and nobody can nail it down in every case, therefore, that's proof that whales and bananas have a common ancestor. That's what you're trying to do, is muddy the water, David. Oh, Kent Hovind cannot define species. Nobody can define species. Nobody can define kind, that'll fit every definition. It's an ongoing dispute on scientists to this day, which is wonderful. That's fine. That's what science is supposed to do. But you are taking that little bitty problem that you see and jumping to the wild conclusion that therefore everything's related. Evolution's true. I won the debate. I don't see how you can't see it. Nobody knows what a species is for sure. Nobody knows what a kind is for sure in every instance. But most of the times, a 4-year-old can tell you, and all of the time, the male of the species can tell you. Find me
Okay.
any male rabbit. Find me any male rabbit that's interested in mating with the pine trees or the billy goats or the llamas. They're not.
Okay, let me jump in there real quick before you respond, David. Let's give you the opportunity to respond, maybe just a quick response to what Kent said there. And then let's set our eyes or focus on something more specific to the debate. The title of the debate is What's the Best Evidence for Evolution? So quickly respond to that, David. And then for the last several minutes, let's engage one of your preferred or best lines of evidence for evolution. Go ahead.
All right, sure. So again, and I want to move on from this topic, but if Kent Hovind wants to define macroevolution as a change in kind, but can't define what he means by kind, then I can't really meet any burden of proof. And as good comment in the sidebar chat is that if Kent cannot define a kind, then David cannot provide evidence of a change in kind from Screwy Scuds Shira. Very good points, and that's exactly my thoughts. And so, can you make sure Dr. Dino is muted? I want to make sure I have equal time from the couple minutes that he said earlier. So, one of the best pieces of evidence that I really like for universal common ancestry are pseudogenes, which are genes that were turned off. And one of the one of my personal favorite pseudogenes is gulo, which in functioning species is able to code for ascorbic acid, also known as vitamin C. Now, most mammals are able to synthesize their own vitamin C. Humans, on the other hand, are not. Interesting, humans, guinea pigs, fruit bats, and all members of the Genomes primate clade, which we are part of, all of them cannot synthesize their own vitamin C. They have to get vitamin C from their diets. Otherwise, they would all die of scurvy. And so what is really interesting is that based upon the nested hierarchy, we can actually make a very interesting prediction. We can predict, okay, is this due to separate ancestry? Did this pseudogene arise separately, independently, or is this part of a common ancestor? And what is really interesting is that in the clade Hafloinini, the Genomes primates, you would find that the vitamin C disabled is basically in the same exact location, but it's in a different location for guinea pigs and in a different location for fruit bats. So this only makes sense under common ancestry. That is one of my personal favorite pieces of evidence for common ancestry, at least among the clade primates. And this is just something that you would not make sense if it wasn't, if the mutation arose independently. Now, I know what you're probably thinking. You might be thinking, wait a minute, this seems to be a terrible mutation. How would it persist in the population?
Well, David, if I could jump in, because it looks like that's been about 3 minutes each for the both of you. Why don't we allow
sure.
Kent now to...
Let's have Kent do that, and then I'll continue my response. So, yeah, go right ahead, Kent.
And then if I could, Kent, before you respond, if you wanted to make a couple comments to the first part of David's rebuttal, feel free to do so. And then it looks like the line of evidence that David presented has to do with, and correct me if I'm wrong, David, shared broken genes. And you looked specifically to the gulo pseudogene. The observation, you're saying that humans and chimpanzees cannot synthesize vitamin C, and therefore this is a shared...
Right. And if it's not just humans and chimpanzees, it's actually all members of the Genomes primates. So all members of Hafloinini, all broken in the same place. So the shared...
Okay. Go ahead, Kent, take equal time to respond.
Well, any gene is unbelievably complicated. And so if quite a few creatures have a broken gene, I think that's the opposite of evolution. Suppose we discover that all the Fords built in 1999, the clock on the dash stopped working. Wow. That would be an example of something, very complex thing that has now ceased to work. All the Fords had something malfunction and all the clocks stopped working. Okay. Well, the rest of the car still works. The rest of the chimpanzee still works. The rest of the human still works. The fact that we cannot synthesize vitamin C, well, then eat an apple or an orange and get it yourself. Your body will tell you when you're low in vitamin C. Your gums will bleed. Your fingernails will get hangnails around the side. Different things will happen. So vitamin C deficiency. You learn those things and you eat that food. But if he said that was one of his best evidences, is that all the primates have this same broken gene, I don't have a quick answer to that. That's interesting. I've never heard that argument made, but I will do some research on that. Does that therefore prove a common ancestry? Or that maybe they all went through the same common trauma, like Noah's Ark being on the flood for a year, and it affected the primates and not the giraffes, maybe. I don't know. But if that's evidence that bananas are related to whales, in your mind, I feel sorry for you. That we all have a broken gene. Interesting. If that's true, I'll find out. Broken gene, pseudogene, shared vitamin C. I do know there is a problem with vitamin C absorption and stuff like that. So I will check into that. Thank you for bringing that to my attention. But if that's your evidence that whales and bananas have a common ancestor, I think you really are stretching. It's a broken gene. It's a broken gene. It's nothing added, nothing new to the gene code. It's a broken gene. That's not going to help your cause of hurting your amoeba to a whale.
Okay, so again, it's a broken gene, which is exactly what we would expect under evolution. This is a direct testable prediction that common ancestry makes. And we can see pseudogenes, we can see endogenous retroviruses, we can see that throughout all of life, and we can use these to create and show that all of life shares a common ancestor. Now, I want to keep on the topic of pseudogenes, and I specifically just want to focus on the primate clade and want to focus exactly on the vitamin C pseudogene. You said that perhaps it's due to the trauma of Noah's flood, but okay, that doesn't explain why it's broken in the exact same place just for all members of Hoplonini, which is quite convenient. But it doesn't. But it only seems to affect all Hoplonini in the same place, but different places in guinea pigs and fruit bats. So again, this is a direct testable prediction for evolution. This is a direct confirmation of evolution. And this was the point of the two papers that I was showing earlier within these various proteins, within these various statistical analysis. This statistical probability for all of these to be separate ancestry is literally lower than picking among all protons the same random proton twice in a row. And this is literally the point of the papers that I brought up earlier. Again, why would they be broken in the same place if it wasn't for common ancestry?
Go ahead, Ken. Equal time. Oh, no worries.
As I told you, I don't have a quick answer to that, but I've never heard that used as an argument. If all of them do indeed have a gene broken in the same place, you're talking about a gene code that's millions of lines long, and one line of code is broken or missing. Therefore, nobody wrote that code. This is what you're thinking. We see all the Ford clocks are broken, therefore nobody built the Ford. No, I think that's real faulty analogy or faulty logic on your part. I don't have a quick answer. I'll do some research on that. But if indeed you are correct that they all have the same broken gene and they cannot synthesize vitamin C, that is not adding information to the gene code. That's not going to help evolution. You can choose to believe that as evidence for common ancestry if you'd like, and I'm sure you would like that, but it could just as easily have another explanation that I don't know yet. I'll find out. But that's, again, that's losing, David, that's losing something. That's not gaining something. They didn't gain anything. They lost the ability to synthesize vitamin C. How is that going to help your evolution theory?
Okay, so again, thank you for admitting that you don't have a good answer. I do appreciate your honesty there. And I certainly do hope that you will look into it, and maybe you'll make a video response talking about vitamin C. And then sure, I can make a video response to that. I actually would like to say thank you for actually being willing to admit that you don't have a good answer. So I do actually want to thank you for that. Again, as I was saying, this is a direct testable line of evidence that we would expect under evolution. So as far as gaining information that you were talking about earlier, the example that I gave, I think HIV into an SIV is a very good example of new information being added in order for SIV to be able to go into SIV, in order to become HIV, had to undergo a lot of different changes. And because human tetherin is so different from the SIV, the ancestral thing from SIV. So that is a good example. And I'll just kind of reiterate, this is what I brought up in the last debates. And I really like this example because I don't think the virus SIV, in order to jump host to humans, had to mutate into a form that could overcome the natural immunity to SIV in humans. We have a gene called tetherin that evolved to confer resistance to retroviruses. It literally tethers them to the inside of the cell, and they infect in preventing the virus from replicating. For SIV to actually be able to infect humans, it actually had to overcome the suppressive effects of human tetherin. So what it did is SIV CPZ evolved by acquiring two anti-tether genes, NEF and VPU, one from each of the original monkey viruses that fused to form the chimpanzee virus. The NEF gene mutated to overcome the chimpanzee tetherin, but the VPU gene remained essentially insert. So when the virus jumped to humans, the human tetherin was different so that the NEF gene could not overcome. So the VPU gene had to mutate to overcome the human tetherin, which allowed HIV1 group M to infect humans. So that is a very, very, very good example of new information. This new information had to be there in order, and this is a good example of irreducible complexity as well.
If you wanted to wrap it up, David.
Yeah, sure. So again, because you had to have various mutations working together in order to enable the SIV to jump hosts. So I'll yield the mic.
Okay, I appreciate that. Before you respond, Kent, let's give you equal time to respond. And then for the next response from you, David, we're going to make it your concluding statement because we are already 10 minutes over the discussion time. It's been a great, engaging discussion portion. I appreciate it. The fact that we managed to make it professional. So, Kent, we're going to hand it over to you. Take equal time to respond to David's points. Then, David, you'll get a closing statement.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I could not understand all he was saying. I will do some research on this. Something about HIV, therefore, the genes are broken in the same spot. I couldn't understand his question precisely, so I'd rather just go to audience Q&A, and I'll do some research on both of those for our next debate, if you'd like to do it again. The fact that the changes have been negative, detrimental. If the clock stops working on your car, that's not going to prove the car can turn into a helicopter. This is a loss of information, and I think that's all we've ever seen is losses of information or scrambling of existing information, never creating new information. So I think the burden of proof has never been met by the evolutionist, and you'd have to have this happen trillions and trillions of quadrillions of times to change an amoeba to a whale. They are dreaming. This is imagination, and they have to have billions and billions of years. And there's lots of ways to prove that can't be true. All you need is one proof of a young Earth, and the case is closed. One proof of a young Earth. The genetic load is increasing in humans, not decreasing. This is a problem if you want to believe man's been here for a long time, billions of years. So we can do another debate on that. So I would rather, Donnie, just go straight to audience questions unless he's got something else. It's already been an hour and 40 minutes.
Okay, did you guys want like a real quick 2-minute wrap-up concluding statement, or do you want me to go into the audience questions? Up to you, gentlemen.
It's up to David.
Okay, sure. So I'll just make a quick closing remark. So the topic of the debate is the best lines of evidence for evolution. The main lines of the evidence that I brought up is the age of the Earth, nested hierarchies, and the biostatistics. Unfortunately, we didn't get to cover everything that I mentioned in the opening. And Ken Hovind said he wants to do another debate. Perhaps we could do a debate on the flood if he wants. And again, I would like to really say thank you for Ken Hovind for at least being honest enough to say that he doesn't have a good answer for the broken gene regarding the ascorbic acid, vitamin C. But there is something that I do want to point out is that Ken Hovind wants to define macroevolution and evolution as a change in kind. So therefore, in order for me to meet my burden, I need to know what he means by kind, and I obviously need to know what he would consider a change in kind. He speaks out of both sides of his mouth on this issue, and he can't really define what he means by it. And so I can't meet my challenge if I don't know what that challenge is. So I will just wrap it up by saying that I have an after show on my channel. I hope that you all stop by and come on.
All right. Thank you, David, for that concluding statement. I appreciate it. We're going to hand it over now to Kent. Kent, you also have a concluding statement. Go ahead.
Well, all right. The Bible says very clearly 20 times in the first 7 chapters they can bring forth after their kind. So I did give a definition. If they're able to bring forth, they certainly are the same kind. Now, are there some that are the same kind that cannot bring forth? Maybe they've diversified enough with all of the genetic detriments we've had over the generations. But it doesn't matter. That's not the purpose of the debate. The evidence for evolution. If his evidence, best evidence for evolution is that I cannot give a hard definition of kind when no scientist on earth can give a good definition of species either, then he's changed the goalpost, the purpose of the debate. He wants me to pay to have all the kids in public school taught that an amoeba and a whale have a common ancestor because I can't give a good definition of kind. This defies logic, in my opinion. The Bible says they can bring forth after their kind. The Bible said there would be scoffers in the last days who would be ignorant of the creation and the flood and the coming judgment of God. I feel sorry for David when he faces God one day. He probably doesn't believe there is one and never will face him, but he'll be surprised when it happens. So I'd like to try to win him over. I'm not his enemy. I'm trying to use logic and be kind and stay. And when it's his turn to talk, I try not to interrupt. But there is no evidence of any animal ever producing offspring that are a different kind, that a 4-year-old would tell you, wow, that's different. I think you could put a whale next to a banana and everybody would say they're different. But David believes they're related and have a common ancestor. But he also says he believes in monophyly, that nothing can produce outside of its kind. Well, David, somewhere along the line, the amoeba produced something that was non-amoeba. If it turned to a whale, it had to do that trillions of times. So I don't think you see the dichotomy you have in your own mind. I wish you could see it. You've been blinded. You've been brainwashed. I want to help. So I'm ready for audience questions, unless, we went back and forth here for an hour and 45 minutes. So, yeah, I stand by my statement. I believe the Bible is scientifically accurate. Nobody's ever seen any animal or plant produce something other than its kind, which most of the time is easy to recognize. So a few of them are a little fuzzy, but 99.99% of the time, easy to recognize. Okay, go ahead.
All right. I appreciate that concluding statement there. Kent, hour and a half has flown by. I appreciate the discussion. And to the audience, I appreciate all of the questions that have come in. So we will get through as many as we can, as we usually do here on Standing for Truth. Whoever the question is for, let's make sure that they get the last word. And that way we can move along nice and smoothly. So the first comment that comes in, logical, plausible, probable. Super chat, I appreciate it. He says, Epic After Show is happening right after this debate. So I appreciate it. Okay, so first question comes in from Bob Vandelay. And what I'll do is put it in the comment section and get it up on screen so you gentlemen can see it. And it looks like this one is for... well, let's see. If I can ask a Bible-related question for the Q&A portion. Okay. My question for you, Ken Hovind, is where did the spouses or wives of Cain and Enoch from Genesis come from?
The Bible says in Genesis chapter 4 that Cain and Abel had talked with each other, got into an argument of some kind, and Cain killed Abel. How old were they when that happened? It doesn't say. I would pick a number and say they're probably in their 20s or 30s when they're old enough to argue enough to the point where Cain would kill Abel. How many more children could Adam and Eve had by then? Well, in a perfect world, a Garden of Eden, plenty of food to eat, all the land you want to take over, that have a new baby every 9 months and 20 minutes. So they probably had about 40 kids by then. So he married one of his sisters. Took off for the land of Nod. That'd be my best answer for that. That sure beats if I can't prove that. That is my theory, that Adam married his own rib. So not a problem. When the gene code was unpolluted like it is today, there would be no problem marrying sisters or close kin because there would be no defective genes. Today, we've got carry such a heavy genetic load that it would become dangerous and in some states criminal to marry someone closer than a first cousin. But in the original creation, that was not a problem. So my statement would be Cain married his sister, one of his sisters. Enoch, I don't know how that ties in. That was much later in the story. No problem. There'd be a lot of people by then.
All right. I appreciate it. David, did you want a quick response or go right to your question?
You can just go right to my question, since that's mostly for Kent. I don't really care about that.
Okay, so this one comes in from T-Rock. He says, question for Neff. If evolution is true, why is there a huge database of diseases, but no such database exists for beneficial mutations, particularly in humans?
I'm sure there probably could be a database for beneficial mutations. I'll just have to do some research on that. But I don't think there's a database for harmful mutations either. But again, I could be wrong. I just don't quite understand the question.
All right, I appreciate it. Anything you wanted to add, Kent, before we move on?
Well, that's a very fair question. We do carry a heavy genetic load causing all kinds of genetic mutations and all kinds of diseases that humans are subject to. That's what I've been asking for a long time now. Where is the evidence for beneficial mutations? Beneficial mutation. Plenty of mutations. Where's the beneficial? I don't think there's any evidence for anything beneficial. That's my point. Okay, go ahead.
David, you get the last word. It was your question. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. So whether or not a mutation is beneficial, neutral, or harmful, it is always context specific. A mutation that gives a rabbit a white fur would be very beneficial in an Arctic environment, but would be very harmful in a tropical environment. So again, all mutations are context dependent. But that's all what I'll say on that point.
All right, I appreciate it. So next question here, we've got so many questions that I'm kind of just picking them at random. We'll never get to them all. So here's the next one that comes in, $5 super chat. I appreciate it, from Armor the First. So he says, a question for David: where is the evidence for the changing of the viruses, and how does evolution make sense? I believe is what he wants to say there. Sense in that.
Yeah, sure. So viral evolution is probably one of the is a really good piece of evidence for evolution, just because viruses mutate and change so rapidly, so we can observe them in a relatively short period of time. Again, HIV becoming SIV is a really good example. And I already told them, I think I already explained the evidence for the changing of the virus. That it had to mutate in order to overcome human tetherin.
Okay, I appreciate the question and also the response there, David. Dr. Dino, anything you wanted to add to that one?
Well, let's imagine a scenario where the police are coming through, arresting everybody, hauling them off to jail, and they handcuff them and drag them off to jail. But you don't have any arms, so they can't handcuff you. Oh, is that a beneficial mutation? Well, in that particular instance, yeah, it's beneficial. They can't handcuff you, but overall, it's not beneficial. And it's a loss of information. You lost your arms. You didn't gain any. I think we'll find that to be something similar to the HIV. It is now no longer able to be locked onto by the antiviral, whatever they're putting on it. So it's a loss of information, like not having arms. So they're calling that a beneficial mutation, but it's actually not. It's a loss of information. Everyone I've ever seen involves a loss, never a gain of new information. That would be, it's like if a person is born with 6 fingers, hexadecimalism. That's not new information. They already had the gene code to build a finger. They built an extra one. That's all. That's not new information. That's duplicating existing information. So all I've ever seen in viruses and any mutations, they're harmful, fatal, or neutral. Nobody's given a good one. And this question was, there'd have to be a huge database of good ones, like trillions of them. So far, they can't find one. I rest my case. Go ahead.
You can just
go ahead, David. Last word. Yeah.
You can go to the next question.
Oh, okay. Okay. So thank you for the response, Ken. And the next question here comes in from Jeremy Wong. He says, question to David. David, you could probably see in the private chat. Most questions are for you. So
yeah.
He asks, is there a large distinction between the human mind and the animal mind in terms of rationality?
I don't think I understand the question.
When it comes to the mind and just rationality, do you find that there's a large distinction between the mind of a human and, let's say, a chimpanzee?
Again, I don't know. I don't honestly have a really good answer for this. So I'll just I'll be honest, like Ken Hovind did, and say I don't have a good answer for this.
No worries. No worries. Ken,
and I will say I do appreciate your honesty, Ken, with that.
I think it's quite obvious to anybody there is no animal on the planet that's anywhere close to human as far as what the mind is capable of. I would classify life into three different forms. There's plant life, which has a body. It's alive, but it doesn't seem to be aware that it's alive. Animal life is very different. Animal has a body and a spirit. It knows that it's alive. Man has a body, a soul, and a spirit. Man knows he's alive, he knows he's alive, and he's aware that there's something higher than him, like a God, in most cases. Animals don't seem to have any consciousness of a God. They just have a body and a spirit, where man would have a body, a soul, and a spirit. So I think the question is good. There's a huge a chasm, giant chasm between animal mind and human mind. I did have a few students that made me wonder about that, but there is a chasm, okay?
I see a couple people in the sideboard chat asking me what I'm drinking. I am drinking Turkey Hill green tea. Really good. I am a tea addict. I love tea. I love coffee.
Well, there you go. A few questions answered in one, so I appreciate that. So next question that comes in is from Nui Greek. So he says, question for David. What is your definition of a species? If you cannot prove it, how could you know whether they have diversified enough for macro evolution?
Sure. So species is generally understood for the biological species concept, being a group of organisms that are able to interbreed and produce fertile offspring. And so macroevolution is evolution that is at or above the species level. So speciation is the definition of macroevolution. If you accept speciation, which all creationists and evolutionists do, then you accept macroevolution. And if evolution were actually the case, we would actually predict that it would be hard to actually define what a species is, because obviously we know that some like for the animals we only know in the fossil record that are extinct, we don't know if they are able to interbreed or not. So we would have to use just morphological information just from that. So I'll leave it at that.
All right. Thank you for that response there, David. Thank you for the question, Nui Greek. And Kent, if you wanted a response, I see you got some slides up there. Go ahead.
Well, yeah, I think the definition of species, as I've said, and the definition of kind have been a little slippery in a few spots. 99.9% of the time, it's easy to spot. I mean, that's the same kind of animal. So I think that he's making a mountain out of a molehill here. He's so desperate to call this macroevolution. Keep in mind, there's at least 6 different stages to evolution: cosmic evolution, chemical, stellar, etc., organic. Where did life get started? I don't think there's any proof that any animal's ever produced anything other than its basic kind. And that certainly would not be proof that life came from a rock, which is what evolution teaches. We started as a warm, soupy pond of soup that came from melted rocks, minerals in the rocks. We came from soup, organic soup. So this is the first of many hurdles David has to overcome to prove the real evolution theory, which goes back and includes the Big Bang, the origin of time, space, matter. That's part of evolution. It's in the textbook. So I think he's so desperate to want to not believe the Bible that he'll jump at anything. It wouldn't matter what anybody said. So I feel sorry for you, David. I'm trying to help you, get you converted.
All right. Yeah,
so
go ahead,
again,
David.
The 6 levels of evolution have nothing to do with each other. The origins of the universe, the origins of the planets, all of these are distinct theories and distinct hypotheses. Now, we could debate each one of them separately and individually, but if the Big Bang Theory were proven to be false tomorrow, evolution could still be true. These theories are independent. They are distinct sciences. and they do not depend on one another. Saying that evolution is false because you don't know the origins of the universe is like saying that the germ theory of disease is false because you don't know where germs came from. So they're distinct theories. They have nothing to do with each other whatsoever.
All right, that was your question, David. So we'll give you the last word on that one and move on to this next question from Philip on water. So he says, question for David. Would you please explain polystrate fossils? How do they not contradict the geological column?
Sure. So polystrate fossils, you often see this in trees. These were well explained in the 1800s. So none of them. So this is not really that difficult at all. Polystrate trees, as single flood deposits, easily deposit sediments several feet thick, and some just stand there and just they don't decay immediately. So they trunk there could remain for a long time, and sediment builds up around it. Again, that's not really hard to explain. This was very well explained in the 1800s.
All right, I appreciate that. We'll hand it over to Kent. Kent, for your response.
All over the world, literally hundreds of petrified trees have been found standing up, petrified, running through all the layers that they're claiming are different ages. I have said many times the geologic column does not exist anywhere except in the imagination. If the top layer is younger, where did it come from? Is this coming from outer space? Are layers being added to the Earth from space, like a new shell put down every once in a while? There is no geologic column. The good question is good. Polystrate fossils, poly meaning many, strata meaning, the layers. Polystrata fossils, sometimes they're upside down, running through the layers, where the root end of the tree is up. I would say this is clear evidence that all the layers formed rapidly, like is described in Noah's flood. If the water is going up and down with the tide and in and out with the tide as it rushes in to fill the bump and exits the bump, it's going to form thousands of layers in 1 year. If I shuffle a deck of cards, is the top card younger? No. All the cards are the same age. The fact that it ended up on top is a coincidence, and the fact that some layers end up on top is a coincidence, mostly hydrologic sorting. But the question is legitimate. There are polystrata fossils. They're forming now in Mount St. Helens, in the lake there, Spirit Lake. Some of the logs that were blown in there 40 years ago are still floating around in the lake. Some have floated in the upright position and are slowly sinking to the bottom. They'll be stuck in the mud. Layers will form around them, and they will petrify in the standing position. And somebody will dig them up in 100 years and say, wow, this is 42 million years old. And when it's not. So polystrata fossils, I think, are difficult to impossible for an evolutionist to explain. There is no such thing as a geologic column. Does not exist. All the layers probably formed in less than a year. Okay?
Thank you, Kent. And David, the question was for you. So you get the last word.
Good job explaining how polystrata straits form with this Mount St. Helens example. That is a pretty good answer to the question.
All right, as we start winding it down here, guys, because we are at the hour and 45-minute mark, we'll kind of end it with these last couple questions here. This one comes in from Noah Larson. I appreciate it. Noah asks, question for David. Since we started with bacteria, and the bacteria that became resistant to the antibiotic remain bacteria, isn't this just another example of variety within the same kind?
So again, bacteria is an entire domain. So this is like saying a eukaryote is still a eukaryote. I don't quite understand this argument. It's still a bacteria. Well, of course, it's still a bacteria. That's what we would expect. I mean, if a bacteria gave birth to a whale, that would actually falsify evolution, not confirm it.
All right, I appreciate the answer. And over to you, Kent, for your response.
But if the bacteria turn to the whale over trillions of generations, that's okay. So it can't turn to the whale quickly, but it can turn to the whale slowly. So if the prince flies through the air, that's a fairy tale. But if the prince walks through the air, that's science. This is how dumb it is, David. The bacteria only produce bacteria over trillions of generations. It's not going to help ever turn to a whale. But you do believe a whale and a bacteria have a common ancestor. For the record, David, do you believe a whale and a bacteria have a common ancestor?
Yes, I do.
Okay, thank you, sir. I rest my case.
All right. Well, we're going to end it with this last question for tonight. Thank you both, Kent and David, for keeping this engaging. This last question came in from, I must have missed who it came in from. It just says at SFT. This question is for you, Neff. What is the best, or I guess your personal favorite, evidence, specifically in biology, for evolution theory?
That is observable. Both macroevolution and microevolution are observable. We can observe the microevolutionary changes within a species, and we can also observe the macroevolutionary changes. We can observe speciation, and we can make testable predictions based on the fossil record, and we can also make testable predictions on the molecular clock. That is one of my personal favorite pieces of evidence for evolution. So I'll have it at that.
All right. I appreciate the response. I appreciate the question. And Kent, we'll hand it over to you if you had some points you wanted to add and a response of your own.
I would point out, David, there is no such thing as a fossil record. There are fossils, trillions of them, but there's not a fossil record. None of the fossils we have in our museum, and we have a lot of them, none of them have a date stamped on them. None of them can talk. When you dig bones out of the dirt, all you really could prove is it died. I cannot prove this clam had any children. I could not prove this clam had any children that lived. Nobody could. But you believe somehow the bones in the dirt, the fossils, were able to do something that no animal today can do. Produce something other than its kind. I bet if this clam did have babies, they were clams. I'd bet money on that. So there is no such thing as a fossil record. There are fossils. I think that's evidence of a flood. I think the fossils are screaming at everybody, hey, this clam is closed. He's probably screaming, I died quickly. I was buried rapidly in Noah's flood. If the water came up 200 feet with a harmonic tide during the flood, it would come rushing in at the speed the earth is turning at your latitude. Here in Lennox, it's 886 miles an hour. It would bring in a layer of mud 50 feet thick in 10 seconds and bury the clam beds. We find these by the millions, petrified closed clams. Tennessee's got one spot up there, 10 feet thick for miles, petrified closed clams. They find them on top of Mount Everest. There's no fossil record. There are fossils. And I think they indicate rapid burial while they were alive, closed clam, and preserved under mud to turn them into stone. No animals today are fossilizing. Why are there so many fossils when it doesn't happen today? It's an example or evidence of one giant catastrophe called Noah's flood. So if your evidence for evolution is the fossil record, you're dreaming. There is no fossil record. And all that shows is rapid burial. And none of the animals in the fossil record, in the fossils, show a change to something else. And none of the fossils can reproduce or produce babies. Today, cows make cows. I bet fossil cows made cows too.
Thank you. I would love to have a third debate with you on the flood, and we can discuss that point specifically. There are a lot of problems here. Number one, you mentioned Mount Everest. As we already established, Mount Everest is part of the Himalayan Mountains, and the Himalayan Mountains are formed by the collision of the Indian plate with the Eurasian plates. And so obviously this means that Mount Everest was once at the sea floor, which is exactly what we see with the mountain ranges being uplifted from the slamming of the continents. That's not difficult to explain at all. And we also see fossils that actually preclude Noah's flood. For example, in the Grand Canyon, there are fossil footprints that absolutely cannot be explained by a flood. And I would love to have a third debate with you on Noah's flood. I hope you would agree to that, and we can have it right here on Standing for Truth's channel. Would you agree to a third debate just on Noah's flood?
I didn't understand hardly a word of that. I'm sorry.
I said, would you agree to a third debate on the flood?
Let me think about that. See, I'm not trying to teach the flood in the public schools at taxpayer expense. You guys are demanding we teach your religion in the taxpayer schools at everybody's expense. So I don't think the burden of proof is on me. I think the burden of proof is on you guys. Prove there's evidence that, all life came from non-living material and that all life has a common ancestor. I will consider that. I'm not afraid of that. However, then you would get the idea that I now have to prove the Bible is true, which that's not my burden. I believe it's true. I've chosen to believe it. I've never seen anything wrong with it. But burden of proof, that's why I like what Donnie's done here. Where's the evidence for evolution? Let's do a whole series of debates. So far, nobody's shown any. How many have we had on this, Donnie? 4 or 5 now?
Yeah, quite a few.
And 4 or 5 more scheduled. So where's the evidence for evolution? The burden of proof's on you, not on me. But I'll think about your offer. Thank you.
And a few people in the chat were asking when the next debate is on this evolution challenge that we put out a little while ago, and it is next week. It'll be Kent versus Wade on YouTube. He goes by Wade the Wizard, so I'm sure that'll be one to remember. Looking forward to that one. And a couple more at the end of the month. Mark Drysdale will be back. We will also be having Mike from the Call Me Emo channel. He'll be here to debate Kent. And also I got the graphic up on screen here. The big one, the exciting one, Tom Jump and Kent Hovind, 2 seasoned debaters here. So next week is the next debate, but after that, we will be having plenty more as well. Make sure you're keeping yourselves up to date on the upcoming live stream section of the channel. Okay, gentlemen, thank you again for giving us 2 hours of your time. We've had a great chat, 300 people in the chat, tons of questions, and time flies by. So let's do some final words, final thought. David, quick final words, final thoughts before we wrap it up here.
Yeah, there is an after show on my channel, and would you be kind enough to post a link to my after show on in your sidebar chats? Because I would love to have everyone there.
Yes.
So after show on my channel, I hope to see everyone there, and I'll put a link in this private chats. Come join me on my after show.
All right. Thank you, Neff, for those final words. And Kent, over to you. Final words, final thoughts.
In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. I believe that's true. I don't think there's any way to explain the incredible complexity we see at the micro level through the microscope, or the macro level through the telescope, or just through your eyeballs. There's incredible design at all levels of everything we see. When we look at the bacteria and the way they behave and how they reproduce and how they have incredible gene code, you'd almost think somebody designed it. I believe God created the heaven and the earth, and we're all going to appear before the judgment seat of Christ, including you, David. I'm praying for you. I'm concerned for you. The Bible says, they lifted up the serpent, that whosoever believeth in him should not perish. If you believe in Jesus Christ, you won't perish. Whosoever believeth in him should not perish, but have everlasting life. I accepted God's offer 53 years ago yesterday. Boy, am I glad I did. He changed me from the inside out. He wants to change you if you let him in. So I'll pray for you. Call me anytime. 855-BIG-DINO, extension 3. I answer the phone as often as I can. And if you want to keep anything private, I will keep it private. I'll never tell anybody until you tell me I can. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Kent, David, and thank you again to the audience. I appreciate everybody tuning in. There's 2 after shows. There's one over on John Maddox's channel, Logical, Plausible, Probable. There's one over on David Neff's channel. So the battle, the debate continues after this. Thank you for tuning in. Standing for Truth is out. God bless.